In this video, we're comparing the Universal Audio Apollo X4 against the Neumann MT48 Audio Interfaces. Apollo interfaces are well established, featuring preamp modeling technology, unparalleled monitor processing with zero audible latency, and a modular expandable architecture. They are very competitive all-round devices with solid conversion, strong headphone amplifiers, and ship with a host of UAD2 plugins. Neumann don't make audio interfaces, so instead they've made the smart move of buying Swiss company Merging Technologies, who do, and they have repurposed the Anubis interface as their own MT48. This features onboard real-time effects processing and, in theory, the best conversion on any interface below $2,000. Hi, I'm Ed Thorne. It's good to see you. Naturally, there is a lot to compare here, so forgive me if I don't cover every single detail. Please feel free to ask questions in the comments. I've compiled a device specification comparison chart, which is available to download for free from the free members area of my website, where you can also find out information about my song mixing and drum track recording services. As you can see, I've included information about the Apollo X6 as well, because they're very similarly spec'd devices. The main differences that stand out to me are the Neumann boasts a gain range of 66 decibels and a total available gain of 78 decibels, which is huge compared to UA's native gain range of 55 and 65 decibels total available gain. However, there's a caveat to this. Universal Audio's proprietary unison preamp modeling technology, which physically reconfigures the impedance and gain staging of the preamps to match the sound and characteristics of popular studio preamps and guitar amplifiers, allows for more gain input on some unison preamp models. For example, the SSL channel strip offers 70 decibels of input gain, and the V76 preamp offers 76 decibels. In terms of preamp dynamic range, this is where the Neumann destroys every interface on the market, offering a huge 136 decibels on the mic pre's and 138.5 on the line-ins. The dynamic ranges on the outputs and headphone amplifiers fall in UA's favour, but these measurements aren't everything. We'll talk about the conversion later. The MT48 hosts AES67 digital connectivity for connecting other AES67-enabled devices, including AES-enabled speakers such as the Genelecs, the present-day production speakers, and Neumann's own KH digital range of speakers, bypassing unnecessary stages of DAC and ADC conversion. The MT48 also hosts digital general-purpose inputs and outputs, which can be used as TRS to MIDI IOs. By the way, if at any point you consider purchasing these devices, buying these and any of your home studio gear through the links in the description will help support the channel if you've found value in this video. All right, let's walk through the Neumann MT48 Surface. So the main button here is on our left, and this is basically our menu home reset button. If we go into any of the menu options, we just press that if we want to go back and get to this main mixer window. Here you can see all the faders of our input channels. You can also see the ADAT digital inputs as well, but for the sake of neatness, I've disabled them from the menu. Toggling this on this screen will also give you the input channel options, including EQ and dynamics and reverb. We'll come back to that in a second. We have our two monitor outputs and our headphone outputs here. Simply select one of these to adjust the level, and you'll see it's muted the other speaker. Press that one and it's muted A, much like the Alt button function does on the Apollos. We can also mute these speakers and headphones up here using that button. Toggling between each of these will enable us to mix our inputs differently. We can, of course, also assign the same mix to each one of these. However, at the moment, as you can see there, I have the different mixers set for each different sets of output. The main jog wheel here controls our volumes and all of the parameters in the EQ and dynamic sections we'll see shortly. And this is our talkback microphone, which is this teeny tiny little hole here. Going into the preamp section, and we have all the preamp options. We can toggle between mic and line. The pad, we have -12, -24 decibel options. Cut is basically cut the signal or a mute switch. Phase button, low cut options, we have 40, 60 and 80 available, and 48 volts phantom power. Here we can stereo link our channels, but we need to have set the same parameters on our linked channel before we link them. They'll change together, but you can't control them independently once you've set that. I am, of course, recording the audio through this MT48 right now, and if we want to add some EQ, we simply need to press the touchscreen to the EQ button and press on to make sure the processing is engaged, and you'll hear an instant change in my voice. Just to exaggerate this, let's click on that top shelf, turn that on, and you can hear some horrible high end coming in there, so let's turn that off. And just tweak the low end a little bit. Going to take the gain down. To swap between the different settings, simply touch on the screen and then move the jog wheel accordingly. To go back, press the home menu button, and then we can go to the dynamics section. I played around with some compression earlier, so that's a rough compression. You can see it working if I get louder there, but we also have a gate and a limiter in place here. Let's go back again and we can look at the reverb. So we have reverb options available on all the input channels. This won't get printed to your audio, but it is for comfort monitoring purposes. And of course, we can mute that across all the channels by pressing the mute button here. Now, this mute button can also be a solo button, but in the menu options, I wanted mute present, so I've selected that for this demonstration purpose. To tweak the reverb, simply click on the reverb channel, edit reverb, and we have all the standard reverb parameters you would want that you would find in a traditional plugin. Let's go back because I want to check that again, and we can also EQ the reverb. As you can see, that's going to a bus, so we can EQ that as well. So there's a lot of input controls. I do find the touchscreen slightly fiddly. Maybe it's just fat fingers, I don't know, but it is quite a nice approach. The way the layers work reminds me of a live sound desk, so I'm very much at home using this. All of the routing options are available. All the patching options are available on the interface itself. You don't need to go into the software, but you can do that as well. All right, and so walking through the Apollo X4 surface, you'll notice there's no touchscreen, but a lot of the options for the X4 are still available from the interface surface. The preamp and the monitor buttons enable us to toggle between the preamp and the monitor options. If I press monitor here, we can toggle between headphone 1, headphone 2, and the monitor outputs as well. This is the primary monitor output by default, unless we press Alt, which will mute the primary monitor outputs and will activate our secondary outputs. The volume for this is adjustable, but it will adjust the output for both sets. You can, however, trim this in console. The jog wheel obviously adjusts the volume, and this is where you can mute the monitors. You can't, however, mute the headphone outputs, which is a bit of a shame. I wish Universal Audio would update that. Also on our monitor layer, we have our TalkBack engaged switch, which is this little microphone here. Dim, Alt for the second set of speakers, as mentioned, and FCN, which we can apply as a third set of speakers as well. The FCN button has more features on the X6, the X8, the X8P, and the X16 interfaces, but it's only assignable as a third set of speakers on the X4. And mono, which is really useful for having to hand when mixing. Moving to the preamp layer, pressing preamp toggles between input 1, 2, 3, and 4, as you can see. We also have our high pass filter at 75 Hz, 48 volts phantom power, a 20 decibel pad fix, there's no options there like on the MT48, phase switch and stereo linking. Again, once you've linked these, the gains adjusted with the dial here will change for both of them. So if you want them both at 20 dB, you need to set them at 20 dB before linking them. So I've just demonstrated the Neumann effects processing accessible from the interface. It is worth noting that this is a fixed processing chain and somewhat limited in its options. In comparison, no effects or monitor processing is accessible from the Apollo. This is all controlled in console, Universal Audio's desktop monitoring and I/O routing application. And this is where the Apollos far outperform any other audio interface. Console, combined with Apollo's built-in DSP, allows the user to process each input channel with up to 4 UAD2 insert plugins, including EQ, compression, and effects processing. 2 auxiliary sends allow separate reverb and delay blending to up to 4 Q mixers, aka headphone mixers, independently. The X4 is delivered with a selection of UAD plugins for such purposes. Unfortunately, with the Apollo, you can only either record the processed or unprocessed audio, although you can monitor through them separately. You can't record them both at the same time. The MT48, however, allows you to duplicate the input channel and record both the processed and unprocessed versions at the same time. That's a nice touch. On the subject of software, the MT48 isn't supplied with any additional plugins, and a desktop and iPad mixer is available from the Neumann website. The Apollo X4 is supplied with Luna, Universal Audio's proprietary recording system, and the Heritage bundle of UAD plugins, including the 1176 Limiter Collection, LA2A Leveling Collection, Pultec Passive EQ Collection, UA610 preamps, Marshall Plexi Guitar Amp, and Ampeg SVT VR Bass Amp Sims. UA also give you the native copies of these plugins where available. Both the DSP and native versions of these plugins can be used in any DAW mix session. Only the DSP versions can be used for unison preamps and insert monitoring process, as this processing is done on the Apollo itself, facilitating the near zero inaudible latency. If you want to save your computer's CPU, the DSP plugins are handy in mix sessions because this processing also occurs on the Apollo, freeing up your CPU for other processing requirements. And the native versions of the plugins can be used on any computer system anywhere, as long as you have an internet connection to connect your UA Connect account. Let's talk headphone amplifiers. Tonally, the MT48 is arguably more accurate for critical listening, producing a slightly more neutral sound with clearer low mids and an ever so slightly better reproduction of sub-frequency content. The X4 sounds slightly bloated and smeared in the low mids in comparison, but offers a more open and spacious stereo image in the top end with a deeper soundstage. The MT48 seems brighter with an upper mid-range lift, particularly in the nasally vocal frequencies, in my voice, kind of 2 to 3K, for example. But the more forward low mid-range on the X4 might be contributing to this perception. These sonic characteristics are also evident in the monitor outputs, which suggests these colorations are converter related. Headphone output-wise, the X4 delivers about 6 decibels more output level with high impedance headphones, and even more with low impedance headphones. The difference is quite high here. In terms of distortion, the Neumann delivers a crisper sound with my low impedance 20 ohm Order Z planars, but distortion creeps into the top end earlier than on the Apollo. The X4 could drive my medium impedance 130 ohm Sennheiser HD490s more cleanly, where the Neumann sounded like it was clipping high-end transients and introducing distortion in the low end. Now, admittedly, this signal degradation is only occurring when pushed to pretty much uncomfortable levels, but overall, the Neumann sound deteriorates sooner than the Apollo's. This was a similar story for my high impedance 300 ohm Sennheiser HD600s. So in terms of more neutral, critical listening, arguably the Neumann is a better choice here if you're going to stick to listening to low volumes. But if you're trying to drive headphones for multiple musicians who may want very loud signals to record to, the X4 is possibly your choice here. Now, the MT48 has a great feature for headphones. It offers headphone crossfeed level control. Crossfeed blending in headphones counteracts the left and right stereo isolation of headphones, allowing you to blend in signal from the opposite headphone to recreate the sense of listening to speakers in a room in which your ears hears both speakers and not just one side of the stereo imaging, like in headphones. On the X4, you can set up to 2 alternative speaker outputs in addition to your main monitor outputs. In console settings hardware, set the Alt count to 2. This will default your Alt button on the device to your second set of speakers, and by assigning the FCN switch to Alt 2, that will assign the third set of speakers or second alternative set. By default, Apollo will assign outputs 1 and 2 to the first alt set and outputs 3 and 4 to the second alt set. The MT48 offers a single set of additional monitor outputs via the lineouts on the rear next to the XLR monitor outputs. You will need to patch these in the patch bay window within the device. Of course, I had to give you audio examples But this is where I really want your feedback. Leave your comments below on how you think these devices compare. High-resolution copies of these audio files can be downloaded for free from the free members area of my website for closer listening without that pesky YouTube compression. The Neumann captures so much more sub-frequency and bass content. I was quite surprised. I find the lower mids about 250 and the octave at 500 a little honky. This is partly the bass guitar, but I feel the MT48 amplifies this more than the X4. The X4 is delivering a clearer upper mid-range transient to my ears here. The acoustic guitar audio highlights the X4 ability to capture upper mid-range transients better. I feel the Neumann is stifling the upper mid-range a little bit. Overall, the X4 has a more uniform frequency response and a more spacious open sound. Again, I suspect this is related to the conversion.
You're my decaffeinated love, giving me everything you've got. It's never enough, you're trying, but I'm afraid I just don't buzz. I don't feel much. You're my decaffeinated love, giving me everything you've got. It's never enough, you're trying, but I'm afraid I just don't buzz. I don't feel much.
The vocal performance by Caviani further highlights the open airiness of the X4 over the Neumann. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So neither brand has publicly listed the converter chips used in these devices, and I'm not going to rip them apart to find out because I have to send them both back. Even if I could list the converter chip model numbers, unless you're an electronics expert, I suspect they'll be like they are to me, and they probably won't mean anything to you. I've compared a lot of audio interfaces on this channel, and this is the comparison where I think the conversion is playing the biggest role differentiating the performance of each device. The fact that I'm hearing a limited and stifled top end on the headphone amplifier and the preamps suggests that that is a Neumann conversion characteristic. I feel like this is a limitation of the device where I feel it's been marketed as the ultimate conversion device, but I just don't think it's delivering as well as Neumann possibly want it to. And, you know, if it can't outperform an X4, I'm kind of questioning why they haven't gone into more detail and designed their own audio interface, or at least even updated the Anubis interface. Brutal as that may be, leave your comments below about that. The Apollo system is designed to be expandable. Up to 4 Apollo devices plus 2 UAD2 DSP core satellite processors can be connected daisy-chained via Thunderbolt. The devices combine DSP cores and split resources amongst themselves under the hood, making for a very powerful, expandable and modular studio system which can evolve and grow as your studio does. The Neumann system is expandable on the Neumann network. Now, if you've never heard of that, neither had I. Neumann is the world's first cross-platform and cross-vendor audio network management system, primarily focused on expanding the Ravenna and AES67 digital protocols. Neumann is in its infancy, but as more manufacturers focus on making their AES67 devices compatible, you will eventually be able to expand these interfaces with any MADI, Dante, Pro Tools HD, and NMOS compliant systems. Now, that all sounds irrelevant. Most of us don't use that stuff, but arguably that might be the future of home studios as everything becomes more integrated digitally. The MT48 is immediately expandable with other merging technologies devices, such as the Happy and Horus interfaces, which both have MADI and Pro Tools option cards available. The MT48 is supplied with a nice protective travel case and 2 USB-C cables. Be warned, no Apollo interface is supplied with the Thunderbolt cables. Before I started this comparison video, and bearing in mind I've researched, tested, recorded, and listened to these devices over the course of several weeks. These videos take a long time to produce. I was confident I had a good idea which device would come out on top. The Neumann Merging Audio Merger screamed of a high quality product with linear preamps, crystal clear conversion, loads of headroom, generally a high performance audio interface with specifications that threaten the Apollos. I enjoy the MT48's simple, easy to use workflow accessible from the device. The menu and page layer system reminds me of live sound desks, so I was quite at home using this. The touchscreen is a little fiddly. I prefer the hardware buttons on the Apollo, but having access to all the features on the MT48 Surface is more convenient than constantly swapping between applications on your computer to access console. Now, I'm a firm believer that the Apollos offer the most flexible and customizable monitoring options available, and the Unison preamps offer a world of sonic flavors for recording. If I had to choose one device over the other, I am going to choose the Apollo. I was surprised how much more headroom before distortion the Apollo headphone amplifier has, and quite frankly, I prefer the sound of the Apollo preamps. Which device do you prefer to look at, and why? Let me know in the comments. If you want a modular and expandable recording system, you can find out more about the impressive Apollo infrastructure in this video. Check out the Working Audio Tools podcast, where Paul Third and I interview audio industry professionals and constructively compare and critique mixes. I've been Ed Thorne. It's been emotional. Thanks for watching.